Hi everyone, Anthony Fantano here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of the new Game album, the documentary 2.5. Now, if you saw my previous review for the game's The Documentary 2, the highly anticipated sequel record to his big breakout album, The Documentary, about 10 years ago that album was released, you may have noticed that it was a collaborative review with a fellow YouTube music reviewer, Mr. Luke James. Now, we are going to be discussing this sequel to the sequel, Documentary 2.5, here in this review as well, because, we discussed the Documentary 2. We thought we would come together again and discuss the Documentary 2.5. So, I'm just going to take you straight into it.
Transition. And here we are with the magic of the internet for the second time in not too long. Just very recently, we did the first initial segment for this documentary review series, and now he is back again, Mr. Luke James. You can check out his YouTube channel down in the description. We're going to be having a discussion about the second part of this sequel album from famed West Coast rapper The Game. So to start off, what were your general thoughts of this record, and how do you think it compared to the documentary 2?
I actually liked 2.5 better than the first one. I think this one, the first half of it, is fantastic. Like the first 10 tracks, I was on board with it. It seemed like he had a little bit more direction with what he was trying to do than on the first documentary 2. But around the halfway mark, it did start to fall off a little bit. I didn't like the last half of that record too much, but those first 10 songs, man, I thought they were just great. I liked a lot of those songs.
I mean, if you're going to kind of leave it there, I'll pick it up and say I agree with you. Actually, in a lot of ways, this is everything that I kind of wanted the documentary 2 to be. Not only do I agree that the first 10 tracks are great, but the thing is that they're great not only because they're good songs, and I think they had that really fantastic, modern, illustrious production, good features, as you said, kind of focus and direction. He's going into these songs with serious topics. But the documentary 2, it hinted toward being really cinematic and kind of having a bit of a story to it, with some tracks here and there, not all the tracks, but some tracks here and there, kind of linking into one another concept-wise or story-wise, or the beat segues in some kind of way. And on this new record over here, pretty much every single track does that. Now, regardless of whether or not you like the song, the album tells a really coherent, I'm not going to say story because there's no real story arc, but there's a lot of kinship and there's a lot of cohesion between these tracks. Unlike documentary 2, there's not really any moment where it feels like Game is making any kind of unnecessary commercial concessions or compromises in order to have a track or two on the record that might sound trendy. The first half of the record, as I was saying, is really beautiful, really cinematic, really dramatic, really instrumentally dense beats. Reminds me a little bit of Dr. Dre's recent Compton record, and of course Documentary 2. And the whole second half of the record, I kind of liked it a lot as well. Tons of beats on this side that are a bit of a G-funk throwback. There were a few hooks here and there that I didn't care for, but the second half of the album felt like it had a distinctly different personality from the first half of the record, and I liked that. And for the final few tracks, I think he glided it into sort of a really personal and emotional finish really well. I think this album has an excellent flow to it. And even the songs that are some of my least favorites in the track listing here, I didn't even really mind them that much. I didn't really find myself skipping past them or anything like that. And the features overall, I think, did a better job of playing to Game's strengths than they did on documentary 2. You did have those appearances like Future and like Kanye, who sort of seemed like they were off in La La Land or just kind of doing their own thing that you would expect from them on their own records. Whereas the people who you would expect would be out of place here, people like Ty Dolla $ign or even Skrillex, for example, actually, really complement Game very well. And I don't really think sonically or ideologically there's any real hitches on this record. Overall, I kind of like the skits too. I think Game's pitched vocals at the end of Gangbang Anyway maybe went a little long. I thought the sex skit was kind of funny. I thought the radio DJ on this album, while it is a bit of a cliche, was worked in really well. He actually interacted with the music. He had a few funny things to say here and there. Maybe hearing his kids talking on Like Father, Like Son felt a little rehearsed, sort of like they were reading off a script or something. But even that track came off really heartfelt and personal. I was really surprised by this record. And not that it's a night and day difference with Documentary 2, because I like that record. I think Documentary 2 is good. But again, I think 2.5 was really everything I wanted from 2. And aside from a few moments here and there that I don't care for, I don't have a whole ton of complaints.
Yeah, for me, like I said, the first half I liked much better. I found some of the features on the second half didn't really do too much for me. Like, he had a lot of guys on there who aren't overly popular, and I understand he wanted to bring that West Coast flavor and bring some of these more underground guys on to sort of fill out the back end. But I felt like the verses didn't do too much for me. Some of these posse cuts, I wasn't expecting the greatest lyricism, but it's just more that typical gangbang and shit. So I found some of these tracks
like Moment of Violence, for example. You don't really care for Moment of Violence.
I didn't like that one very much. I like what they were going for. It was sort of a fuck the police anthem. But the features on there, they didn't do a whole lot for me. I would have liked to have had a full verse from John Connor, because I think John Connor is an upcoming MC who is going to be fantastic once he really gets his chance to, you know, put out a great album. He's put out some good mixtapes in the past, and I feel like he was underutilized on that song. Then there was, what was it called? My Flag and the Homies.
Yeah.
That one I couldn't get into that one too much. It was a bit all over the place with all the extra people that were tacked on there. But I did like that Battle Cat produced track, the one with Ty Dolla $ign. Is it Up on the Wall?
Yeah.
I think it's called, yeah. I like that one a lot. It had that classic G-Funk sound, and it was good to hear from DJ Battle Cat again, because I haven't seen him on anything for quite a while. Maybe I haven't been looking in the right places, but he's one of those guys who has been producing for the West Coast for a long time. He's produced for a lot of people's favorite artists. And the same thing goes for Fred Reck, who was on this record as well. He produced 80s and Cocaine. He was on that one, and I liked how he had the synths going on there on the end of it. And that was one of my favorite tracks, man. Crenshaw and 80s and Cocaine, it just had that Black Dynamite sound to it, a sort of blaxploitation feel. And Game was spitting some nice bars on there. I thought he sounded hungry on that one. But he did say some funny shit on there like he always does, when he was talking about how he's going to get a prostitute to cut your throat open and then get the police to beat you up, and then he's going to get you raped in jail. I was like, damn, Game, that's a little bit excessive, but, you know, he's talking about his enemies, and that's what he wants to do. But that track was one of my favorites. I really liked Magnus Carlsen, even though I had no clue what that was. I had to look up what Magnus Carlsen was, because only Magnus I know is Ultra Magnus from Transformers, and Magnus Carlsen to me sounded like an expensive watch or maybe a fancy car. I had no clue what it was, but apparently it's a chess master from Sweden or Norway. I forget where he's from, but I thought that was sort of a cool idea, because that song with Anderson .Paak, it's all about gang warfare and how it's sort of like a chess game and the ups and downs and the different moves that go on and how people are affected. And that's what I liked a lot about Documentary 2.5 is I feel like Game, he went a little more in depth into the gang banging ideas. Like on Gang Bang Anyway, we got some great verses from J-Rock and Schoolboy Q. I thought they all killed that track. And the production was very dynamic too. There was a lot of stuff happening there. It was building up and breaking down. And they really went into, you know, they brought some nice imagery about what happens when people are gangbanging. He's talking about people being in wheelchairs and prosthetic limbs and just the awfulness that comes with it, but how people are going to do it anyway because some people are trapped in that lifestyle, and that's sort of what they get into. And it's not easy to get out of there. So I thought that was a cool track where it wasn't so much that they were glorifying it. At least I didn't feel that way. I felt they kind of went into detail about why people gangbang, why it happens. And Game went on to explain the Crips and the Bloods, just the origins and all that. So I thought that was a very cool track. And those first couple of songs really set this record off for me.
Yeah, I mean, Gangbang Anyway not only is stunning because of those lyrics, but the instrumental on that one is probably one of the most dynamic of all the instrumentals on the entire record, especially with those really tightly wound strings on the track. And I do agree with you, not only on the lyrics on this cut, but a lot of the lyrics of the first half of the record where he's dealing with these violent themes. He really dives below just the kind of general really cold-blooded brutality and nastiness that you typically expect from a game record. He really goes into some of these topics, but I think where he goes in even deeper, in a sense at least, is on the next track, From Adam. And not only do you see a big difference in what he typically does lyrically, but what he's doing kind of emotionally in his delivery on this track too. On this track, he gets super personal. He gets super vulnerable in a way, and he's just pulling a lot of emotional skeletons out of the closet, not only with, you know, his upbringing and just kind of you know, his lifestyle, but also his relation to people like Suge Knight and just, you know, his history in the industry too, which I thought was really crazy, you know, because usually when he's on about that stuff, it's usually the type of thing that sort of seems to get addressed in the intro track here, where, you know, he just kind of has this really boring setup going on where it's like, hey, whatever happened with you and G Unit, or, you know, like we haven't sort of heard a story that deals with this like a million times from Game before. And I just thought it was going to just be like one more annoying shot, or just kind of one more annoying reference to something that he just cannot put down. But at the end of the track, I feel like he went into the next song by telling us he can't necessarily get rid of his past. You know, this is something that's always going to kind of chase him. You know, he can't erase this history because this history is a part of him. It's a part of his life. And I liked that sentiment a lot. I think it sort of got the album off to a good start. You know, that this was going to be a little bit more of a thoughtful record for him.
Yeah, From Adam was actually one of my favorite tracks, and I was a bit surprised with that because I'm not the biggest Lil Wayne fan. I'm one of those guys who I prefer some of his older stuff.
Was good.
Yeah, yeah. Like, I'm one of those people who I really liked his older stuff, and Carter 1 and Carter 2. Then around Carter 3, I kind of, you know, that one was good too, and then I started to lose interest a bit around Carter 4 and beyond. But I liked what he did on here, and I wasn't expecting that at all because he just did a bit of a sing-songy thing, but I thought his tone really matched up well with what Game was doing on this track. And I found it interesting how he did this track drunk, which he's done in the past on some of his other songs, and that's why he's got that raspy, emotional feel going on. He did it on Start From Scratch, and I think the other one was Doctor's Advocate, it was called, the one with Busta Rhymes, and he's like dragging him out of the car, and he's drunk. He's like, get the fuck off me. Something like that. Don't mind my Canadian accent. I know Game doesn't sound like that, but yeah, I like that one a lot, man. Wayne, he shocked me with that one. And I think if he had a verse on it, it wouldn't have fit since it was such a personal song. And Game went into all kinds of detail. He was talking about how when he was shot, which a lot of people have already heard that story before, but I think this time he went even deeper, and he was talking about how, you know, who all was involved in this. And he's even talking about some of his friends and how one of his friends was shot. It was just a great track, and it surprised me because whenever I see featuring Lil Wayne, I just go, oh man, what are we going to get? Is he just going to be auto-tune crooning on this about all the different ways that he eats vaginas, or what is he going to do? But he came through, and it was good.
Yeah, I mean, his lyrics matched the tone of the track. He sung without auto-tune, and he sounded fine, and the delivery that he was singing with, again, kind of matched the emotion of the song. I mean, while I guess I do agree with you in a sense that a lot of the lesser knowns that turn up on the latter half of this album, maybe lyrically, I'm not blown away by them. I do like the really kind of gruff, really in your face and grimy and hardcore delivery that they bring. I think they at least fit in the song. But as far as the more high profile cases on this record, they really bring it. I mean, J-Rock and Schoolboy Q, as I expected, they were great. Scarface on Last Time You Seen was really good. will.i.am was great, just as he was on Documentary too. Also, Busta Rhymes was fine, and there's another. Oh yeah, of course. How the fuck can I forget? Nas was fantastic. Yeah. When he appeared on the record. You know, those are pretty much like the biggest features on the record, and it seems like you know, E40 as well. Every big name that appeared on here really delivered. You know, it was interesting because I just thought going into this record it was just going to be a bunch of throwaways, and it feels like so much more of a focused, you know, version of what we got on Documentary 2.
I absolutely agree, but you left out one name, and I got to bring him up because he's a personal favorite of mine. DJ Quick. I know, look, man, I know this song, like, lyrically, I'm not going to say it's a masterful track. It's just Game talking about it.
It's a super vulgar track. And I can't say I cared for the song lyrically, but DJ Quick to me stuck out more as just a producer credit, you know, than he did a lyricist on the track. And while I agree with you, maybe that's not one of my favorite songs here, I think that song did a great job of sort of setting the tone for the whole second half of the record, because that after that song follows a bunch of other songs that have a similar classic G-funk vibe.
Yeah, that was one of my favorites just because I like DJ Quick a lot, and that beat sounded like it was fresh off one of his old albums. It could have been put right on Balance and Options. And I thought the hook was nice on there too with the singing, even though it was kind of funny. I hope you're giving it today. Whatever that guy was singing. Like, that kind of made me laugh. But the overall feel of it just had that summertime barbecue music type of vibe that you could just turn it on. Probably not at a family reunion. I don't think you'd turn it on there, but had some of your people together just having a barbecue, having some beers. That's the vibe it had, and I like that one a lot. And another one that I liked on here was Life. That came near the end. Yeah. And it kind of reminded me of those tracks that Drake does. Like, it doesn't sound like Drake, but you know how he does those songs where it's just one long verse and he's just letting off about everything, like the 30 for 30 freestyle, Say What's Real. I feel like that's what Game kind of did here, because it's just one long verse and he kind of ties the album together. He talks a bit about his family and some of the things going on in his life, and that Whitney Houston sample on there was real smooth, so I really like that track a lot as well.
Yeah, man, other than that, I just don't really have too many complaints about this thing. You know, I do have my reservations as well with My Flag, like you said, but not so much with the first half of the track. I think once they kind of developed into the homies and started to kind of a cappella do that verse, and then the beat came in, I think it just took a little bit too much time to do what it was going to do, and the momentum just kind of went absolutely nowhere. But when the track actually started,
production.
Okay, come again?
Oh, sorry. I said it was just a 6-minute DJ Mustard production, and he makes some all right beats every once in a while, but a lot of the time he just, I don't know. That one was probably my least favorite on there, and I didn't care for Outside too much either. That one was actually produced by Travis Barker, which it was kind of strange to see his name on there. But I thought that beat just sounded like a knockoff, cheap DJ Mustard style production. So those were some of the songs on the later end that I didn't really care for too much, as well as Moment of Violence, like you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, it's true. I do think that the production on Outside did suffer a little bit. It's been kind of interesting to see Travis Barker's name turn up more and more here and there on some hip-hop records, which, again, it's happening more often. I mean, it's happening now, and it's never really happened before. And I mean, they're at least, I'm thinking of there's also that new Run the Jewels record that he appeared on not too long ago. I think his drum playing sort of appeared in the production on one cut from that record. And he may have production on another album that might be slipping my mind at the moment. But again, it's so interesting seeing his name turn up. Yeah, it's been interesting seeing his name turn up, but I can't say this beat really floored me. But you know, I did kind of admire how this track and My Flag too at least sort of added to the old school character of the second half here. I feel like recently we've been seeing this string of albums that have been getting a lot of critical praise that sort of take us back to the early days of boom bap and stuff like that. However, I feel like we haven't really seen sort of a Jeep funk component, you know, to kind of answer what the East Coast revivalists are doing. You know, even from the relevant names that are on the West Coast right now, you know, like TDE, but Game sort of seems to be bringing it back in a way that I don't know a younger artist could, because he seems so much more in touch with that era than a lot of you know, younger people. So as a result, I think the second half of this record sonically goes over pretty well, even if it's not as amazing lyrically as the first half of the album. And yeah, I mean, outside of that, I think I just want to say some of my favorite tracks off here. I love Crenshaw, total banger. I think that the second half of the song glides in really nicely, which was a change of pace from the documentary 2 tracks, where you did kind of have those songs that transitioned at some point, but they didn't go over quite as gracefully. Gangbang Anyway, The Ghetto from Adam, Last Time You Seen was pretty good, and a lot of those party tracks on the second half were fine too. Outside and Quick's Groove are probably 2 of my favorite. Up on the Wall, first half of My Flag. It's just tons of tracks off of this thing that I thought were really good. And Life, as you were saying, I thought that was a really significant emotional moment on the record, even if songwriting-wise, I just kind of wish it was a little bit longer and felt like more grander of a statement to kind of finish the album off, because it really does feel like a big album. It's a very big, personal, dramatic, multifaceted, and sort of cinematic album. You know, not only with the lyrics are you getting a lot of really vivid imagery, but also with all of these very cool sound effects that bring us from one song to another, or kind of happen in the middle of these songs, that really make a lot of the topics talked about in the lyrics come to life.
Yeah, I wanted to come back to the Ghetto right quick. I really liked Nas's first verse on that, when he went into detail about how, you know, there's a lot of poverty and suffering around the world. He even mentioned some of the stuff that was going on in Europe. I thought that was just kind of different. He's talking about ghettos all over the place, not just, you know, what goes on in the United States, which a lot of people kind of just focus on that. I thought that was interesting. Also, Last Time You Seen, I didn't hate that track, but it definitely wasn't one of my favorites. I am a big Scarface fan. I loved his last album, and I think he had a good verse on here, but I'm just kind of tired of all the Tupac, like, mysticism. Like, when's the last time you saw Tupac? I looked in the mirror and I saw Tupac. It just, some of that stuff was a little bit cheesy to me, but I do appreciate the sentiment, because, you know, he's obviously a West Coast legend, and Game wanted to, you know, do something for him. So I get that, but it felt a little bit forced at times for me.
I guess part of the reason I like the track is that it did not go over as badly as I think it could have.
Okay.
You know, it definitely had me hesitating when I first started hearing those refrains at the start of the track about, you know, when's the last time you've seen Tupac, and so on and so forth. And I do agree with you. The latter part of the song where he said, you know, I saw him in the mirror, was really corny. And maybe kind of that vocal cut right before Scarface's verse took a little bit too long, and, you know, did kind of cool down the momentum of the song a little bit. But once Game really started rapping, kind of the passion that he had on From Adam and Gang Related really continues onto this track. And I think his heartfelt delivery really just kind of made it for me. And Scarface definitely matched his energy. And yeah, the song felt, I guess, more like it had a very strong personal connection to the subject matter, you know, more than it did with a lot of other artists who might just kind of casually mention Tupac in their songs.
Yeah, I can agree with that, because with Scarface on there, I think that added a lot of credibility, if you will, to the track, because Scarface obviously worked with Tupac. And in his verse, he does talk a little bit about their relationship, and he actually talks about the last time that he talked to him before he died. So I thought that was pretty cool. But the overall beat and all that, it didn't blow me away. It wasn't a trash track by any means. It wasn't one of my favorites. But another one I did like that we didn't mention is Gang Related. Mm-hmm. That one kind of reminded me of Summertime off Disc 1. It had that nostalgic feel to it, and it was really smooth. I like the vocals on there from Asia, I think her name was. Yeah. And Game goes into the typical gangbang and shit. It's more of the same lyrically, and sometimes it does get a bit repetitive when he's just saying, I've seen some brazy shit, my nigga, and he says that multiple times over and over. But the overall sound of that song, I really liked it. I liked the feel, the beat, and he kind of took us back with that one, I thought.
All right, so overall, I have to say I'm really enjoying this record. I'm definitely feeling like a strong 7 to a light 8 on this thing. Certainly more impressed with it than I was with Documentary 2. No tracks that I would say were throwaway. You know, maybe some moments I didn't really care for as much as others, but there really was nothing on here that I thought was a bad move for Game, unlike with Documentary 2. What are you feeling about the record overall, score-wise?
I have this one at a 4 out of 5. There were really only 2 or 3 tracks that I really didn't like. I didn't like My Flag to Homies, Moment of Violence, and Outside. But they weren't so bad. Like, if I just had the CD playing and they came on, I wouldn't be diving to press fast forward. But they weren't as good to me as the first half. The first half really spoiled me. I remember when I started listening to this to work on this review, I was thinking to myself, is he about to give us a classic with this shit? Because the first 10 tracks were just nuts, and I couldn't believe that this was the second disc. Like, the first disc was pretty good, but then to come through with the second disc and to start it off so damn smooth, that was crazy. So I think the latter end just kind of fell off a little bit for me, but it still had some good moments, like Life. I really liked that one a lot. So 4 out of 5 for me on this disc.
Yeah, I mean, I was definitely feeling the same way for a second. Like, oh man, are we going to get like, you know, like a classic on this one. And not that I don't think people could maybe take this record down that direction into the future, but I do enjoy where he ended up taking it in the middle of the album when he kind of broke it up, gave us that interlude, and then just sort of went in another direction, even if that interlude did go on a little long. I think for him to come through with a record that was totally in the mood of the first half, I think it would have been a little out of personality for him, you know, because I think sort of the party tracks and the brutality of the second half is sort of more in line with what you would expect from Game, but I think it's of at least a slightly higher quality than we're usually getting from him. Though, you know, a lot of those bangers on the first disc of this, you know, double sequel album are definitely undeniably great. And you know, those same moods turn up on here. I'm sure we could talk about this album even more all day, but this review's pretty much done and over with at this point.
Yeah.
I'm glad that
you can't help but think, like, imagine if he took the best 14 or 15 tracks from both discs. Could you imagine if he did that? Like, that's a big if. If my aunt had balls, she'd be my uncle's, but she doesn't, so she's my aunt. But if he took the best tracks, I think it would have been a classic, man. This could have been an album of the year discussion possibly, but this is what he wanted to do. I think it's a very strong double disc. And I don't think he could have done too much better, because think about some of your favorite artists, even if they were to put out that many tracks. And not only is this a double disc, but it's damn near 40 tracks. This isn't a double disc that's like 25 tracks or something like that. It's 2 full discs. So I think he did a great job.
Yeah, I mean, you know, averaging out these 2 records for me, you know, that's like a 7 out of 10 or something. And, you know, hip hop artists, both young and old, you know, there aren't many that are going to drop 40 tracks and overall the project is going to come out that good. You know, he's just dropped so much material this year for us, and it's he really came through. You know, he just really had a fire in his belly and a lot of focus on these 2 projects, and I think that this album should definitely, I don't know, maybe probably serve as a reminder. You know, if it's not going to become a classic, definitely serve as a reminder for us to maybe go into sequel records with a bit less skepticism.
This is definitely one of the better sequel records. And there's more. Did you hear that Puff Daddy is doing a sequel to Puff Daddy and the Family? I don't really feel that great about that one. Maybe that's a bad example. What just happened?
Yeah, you can't bring that up right after I said, hey, we're going to be less skeptical of sequel records from now on. And then you bring that up? Thanks. Thanks.
My bad, dude. My bad.
I'm going to be putting my foot in my mouth after that record comes out.
Yeah, I don't think that one's going to be too good, but we'll see what happens with that.
All right, I want to thank Luke James again for coming on and talking with me for all this time about these 2 Game records. And for sure, we're probably going to see him popping up on some more hip-hop reviews into the future. I'm going to leave a link to his YouTube channel down in the description where, again, you can check out his reviews. He's dropping reviews of new hip-hop records all the time. Thanks for coming on, man.
Thanks a lot, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Forever.